Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's webinar. We're quite excited to introduce Allison McCabe tonight from Allison McCabe Photography to do a bit of an overview with us all about livestock photography and how to get the best photo of your animal. So I will hand over to Allison now to start her webinar.
Thank you. Hi everybody. Thanks for jumping online tonight and listening to a bit of photography tips. So a little bit of background on myself. Grew up with Charolais. My parents owned Charolais ever since I was born, pretty much. So grew up in the livestock industry and sort of picked this career up probably about probably would have been about 7 years ago now, 7 or 8 years ago now. It's sort of it's a passion of mine that I love. It's definitely an art to getting a good shot, but whether it's out in the paddock or in the show ring, it is quite challenging for people that aren't used to it. And all I can say is have patience. That's one of the main or key points, is to have patience. But when we're talking about show ring preparation, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes before you take the photo. Obviously, washing your animal, making sure their coat's nice and clean, all your prep work, your sprays, and all that sort of stuff, getting your hair going forward. Obviously, for your slicker cattle, slick down. Obviously, no manure or no if you can get as much hair off your animal as you can. And then when you're preparing to get your animal stood up into a position to photograph, I always try to tend to get my clients to walk their animal into their stance. Is the easiest way to get your animal stood up correctly. As soon as you start poking and prodding around their feet, they can get sick of it very quickly. So I always try to get my clients to walk their cattle into their stance. Ideally, their offside front foot slightly in front of their near side front foot, and same on their backs with a little bit more angulation. So probably, like, ideally you'd want a foot's width between your two back feet, with your offside back foot being slightly forward or in front of your near side back foot. So you've got good light on your testicles or your udders for your females. Always shoot with the light behind you, so you don't have as much shadow or as little shadow on your animal as possible. Obviously, sometimes it's harder out in the paddock to get them in the right angle, but in the show ring you can manipulate them into a position that is ideal for your sunlight directly on your beast. This is my personal preference for where the head is positioned, and I think that this bull on the screen is ideal where I like to have my animals' heads placed. And this is completely paddock shot, no one assisted, there was no halters, anything. He just stood up there perfectly. So I like to see both of my ears, with obviously your head up, showing that beautiful neck extension through the front, that nice smooth shoulder, and obviously bright eyes, lots of attention and alert. Pretty much that's all you can sort of hope for. Obviously with your lead cattle, you can get people there to move around and make sure they're looking at you. Some people like their head straight forward. Other people like them looking directly at you, but I just love that in between. Just shows that beautiful neck extension and softness through the front. So that's what I ideally like. In a paddock situation, obviously it would be amazing if everybody could wash their animals before you photograph them, but sometimes it's not always that easy, and it's not always convenient to wash 300 bulls before you photograph them. So with that being said, I think everybody can see in the background of this photo, there's a little white tape that runs along the back of him. This is ideally how you would like to have them stood up, only because, and I shoot in a lot of different situations. I shoot in yards, out in the open, and with tape, or even hay bales in the background, stuff like that. The thing with panels and hay bales tend to make them look smaller than what they actually are. Panels, they're sort of an optical illusion when you are trying to line their back up with the panels in the background. So it's not ideal, but yeah, sometimes that's all you can work with. So, but ideally in a paddock situation, you'd have two fence lines, two hot wires, one in the angle of the sun that you're working with. So ideally probably 30 meters or probably maybe 60 meters length that you can sort of, and you work obviously downhill and walk them up. And you've got ample amount of room to get the animal to stop naturally. And that's the biggest thing that I get my clients to try and do. We want them to look as natural as possible when they stand up for a photo. Not forced, not manipulated. I know in a show ring situation it's completely different, but in a paddock situation, we want them to look as natural as possible and as calm as calm as well. Like, yeah, and that's really about it. I tend not to Photoshop my images much. There might be a few little blemishes that I will fix up, but I will never change the colour of a beast or its natural hair type, as that's I just believe it's not a true representation of the animal. And yeah, what else can I think of? It's always good to have nice, clean leather wear in a show ring situation. Yeah, and that's about it for me. Obviously, always try and work with your son as best as possible, as much as possible. Your son is your best friend and the most important tool when you're photographing animals. And practice, and patience. It's not a job for the faint-hearted, and it takes a lot of patience. And a lot of people have asked me, how the hell do you do this, and how the hell do you do it all the time? And it's just, yeah, I absolutely love it. I'd do it every day of the week if I could. So, but yeah, that's about it for me. Any questions?
Alrighty. So if anyone's got any questions, there's a little Q&A function down the bottom. You can send through a question, or a chat function, depending on whether you're on like an iPad or a laptop or something like that. The Q&A will either be, the buttons will either be along the bottom or along the side.
So Wendy's just asked, what camera can you recommend? My personal preference, I use Canon. I've got a Canon 5D Mark III that I use. In a show ring situation, I use a lens that's a 24 to 70 mil lens with an autofocus. In a paddock situation, I use 100 to, I think it's a 70 mil to 400 mil Canon lens with an autofocus as well. So, but you can use, I don't know too much about Nikons. I know in the Canon cameras, the smaller the number, the better the camera. But to give you some clarity, or I started with a 1000D Canon camera, and that's what I learnt on, and it was absolutely amazing. But when I started to get a bit more serious, I jumped from a 1000D to a 5D, and have literally never looked back. Those cameras were both beautiful in their rights, but they were chalk and cheese, really. So yeah. What angles do you photograph from? So in terms of angles, I really go for the base of the animal. A lot of animals differ if they're weak in the hind quarter or stronger through the front. You can change your angles a little bit, but I try to take square onto the pizzle or the navel, and I may slightly just change my angles a little bit, go a little bit further back if they're sort of weaker a little bit in the hind quarter, or I'll go a little bit forward if they're a little bit heavy set it in the front. But I really don't like to do that because it sort of sends out a false advertising of the animal. So I try to represent the animal that's in front of me as best I can. So yeah. How do you take a video from a moving animal? Good question about taking a video of a moving animal. Firstly, get a tripod. That'll be your number one tool to hold your camera on a tripod. And then you can either, it really depends what you're taking the video on, whether it's a phone or an actual video camera, or a camera like I can do both video and photos on my camera. I choose not to. I just leave my camera to take photos of my animals, and I have a video camera for all the video work that I do. It's just easier to be set up. So I've got my video camera on my tripod ready to go, and I've got my camera set up ready for my photographing. So yeah. Any tips? Look, there's a fair few things you can do to get their head orientation just right. You can use umbrellas, you can use plastic bags, you can use grain bags on a long pole to get their heads up in the air. Generally, actually, just people walking around in front of them, making noise, and just doing, I get people to do funny movements and just to grab their attention. And that's generally enough for them to lift their head up and want to look in the direction that I ideally want. I do take, depending on if the animal is good and well behaved, I'll take probably anywhere between 5 and 10 shots of that one animal, and I'll just go through and I'll pick the image that I love the best and the right angle of the head. If the animal stays in that one position, I will, that's the beauty of digital, you can delete it. And I'd rather take too many photos of one animal than get home, go through the editing process and think that I've got the right photo and then find out that I don't. So I'd rather take more photos than not enough photos. So what time of the day is generally better to take photos? Probably you like to work with your morning sun and your afternoon sun. So if you were to go out into your backyard or where you would like to take photos, have a look at the morning sun and where it hits, and also the afternoon sun. Because you generally, I do take photos in the middle of the day, but I tend to just lighten the shadow a lot to get that horrible shadow off the beast. But yeah, I would just work with your morning sun and your afternoon sun. And they're your best times. So between sort of 11 o'clock and 1:30, I tend to not take photos, or even just an hour in that middle of the day, just so that the sun drops a little bit, then you're able to get better photos. But on a cloudy day, go for gold. You don't have to worry about the sun at all, or the position really. You just have to take the photo. So yeah, that's a bonus. So camera settings, is there certain settings? I'm a big manual shooter, so I like to have full control over my exposure, my aperture, and my depth of field and everything like that. So I love to shoot in manual. Sometimes it's hard to, I find it a little bit hard to get the exposure right in manual mode. So sometimes I will flip to a different setting on my camera, but generally I like to do it in either AV on a Canon camera or M, which is RAW. Sometimes also in light, in very low light, I may switch to like your sports mode. It just seems to pick up your images sharper. JPEG or RAW, I always shoot in RAW. There's pros and cons in that. They're a larger file, so they take up a lot more space on your computer, but you've got more options to edit when you get home. So yeah, it's just preference that I have. I used to always shoot in JPEG until about 5-6 years ago. I changed to RAW images, and I've never looked back. More so because I got a bit more involved in editing photos and stuff like that. So I needed to be able to work out how to edit in RAW function. So yeah.
There are a few questions that came through on Q&A.
Yeah.
Where is the best place for you to stand in relation to the animal being photographed?
Yeah. So sort of similar to the question about angles, I try to be square onto the animal's navel or pizzle, or navel. So it's pretty much the center of the body. So straight over the rib cage, center of the back. And I generally crouch down when I take photos. This isn't to enhance the animal to make it look bigger, anything like that. It's just a personal preference that I've done for a really long time. I feel like it centers the animal in the photo a lot more. And yeah, I love the results that I get from it. So yeah.
Alrighty. Another question was, can you list some do's and don'ts for background distractions, especially when taking spontaneous paddock shots, e.g. horizon lines, fence lines, trees?
I tend to crouch down. So fence lines don't usually get in my way that much. As soon as you crouch down, the fence line goes into the body of the animal. So I never, ever shoot over the top of an animal. Never, ever. And I will never take a front on angle unless I'm taking a dead, like, headshot straight on a beast. Yeah, so being spontaneous shots out in the paddock, I always try to have a blue sky or sky background. Having trees in the background tend to shadow the animal and you can't see the animal as well. So if you've got a light background like a sky, you can see all the outline of the animal, and it sort of gives that 3D effect, or like that good depth of field. Yeah.
Alrighty. You mentioned panels and hay bales in the background. Any views or hints concerning standing in dusty conditions or long grass?
Dusty conditions or long grass. Ideally, long grass is probably not ideal, only because it really shortens up your animal. You want to be able to see the photo that I've got in the background. Even that grass is probably a bit too long. The grass in the foreground would be more ideal, because then you'd be able to see the animal's feet as well. So long grass, and you'll see in a lot of Canadian and American photos, they're always in hay, and they look like they've got really, really tiny legs. So I guess here in Australia, I just always try to have short grass wherever I photograph cattle. Yeah, I guess to me it shows that we're not trying to hide anything with the animals as well. So dusty conditions, sometimes you can't avoid those situations. You've just got to do what you got to do. But I guess watering down wherever is dusty is a bonus. Yeah, ideally you'd probably rather not do it in a dusty situation, but if you have to, I'd probably try and water it down so it's not so dusty, which then reflects on the dullness of your coat of your animal. So dust is probably not your best friend when you're trying to photograph, but yeah.
Alrighty. Another question is, what is a good program to edit photos with?
Yeah. So 90% of my photography, I use Lightroom. It's really easy to use. I never used to use Lightroom until about 4 years ago. Before that, I always used to use Photoshop. And Photoshop is very good, but I would say the bulk of my stuff I do through Lightroom. Yeah, you can use other programs as well, but those two are my main programs that I use.
Alrighty. Another question is, what is the future of capturing images of cattle -3D?
Oh, geez. That's a hard question to answer. I'm actually not really sure. Like with the way that technology is.
Are you still there, Alison? You might have cut out.
Hi everyone, I'm back.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. It just cut a second. In terms of it's going to be.
I think you might have cut out again, Alison. We'll just see if Alison can join us again.
I'm back.
Alrighty, yep, we can hear you.
Sorry, I think it's probably my program's probably getting sick of listening to my voice. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe I won't share my screen. That might be the ticket. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really sure about the 3D imaging. It's pretty exciting the way technology is going. But yeah, it's not sure. It's it's in hands of people above me.
Another question we got through is, what is the most important part of the animal to focus on?
Look, to be honest, it's all important. I know that's a very broad description and broad answer, but every part of the animal is important. If you've got your animal stood up perfectly, your next most important thing, and I know some people may disagree with this, is how your animal is looking, as in their head angle and attention. For some reason, you can have the most perfect shot, but your animal's looking a different way or not in the right direction, and therefore takes away from the photo. But I think it's something about that head angle and alertness in the photo that really ties it all together. Yeah. So first and foremost, how your animal is stood up is probably the most important part. And then, yeah, everything else sort of comes into play after that.
All right. Another question was, what would your f-stop have been set at for the picture that was on the screen?
Probably the most, probably 2.8. That probably would have been, yeah, I do love to get the best depth of field. Just really makes that animal pop out of the background.
Great. And the last question we've got is, best way to get an animal's attention to look. Any tips?
Yeah. So there's a fair few different things you can try. You can try umbrellas. You can try a grain bag on a piece of poly pipe or a show cane. You can try plastic bags up in the air on a show cane or a broomstick, anything like that. Some people use like a bottle with rocks in it to shake around like a rattle. Yeah, you really have to gauge it on the animal and how they're behaving. If they are very intense and maybe uneasy, unsettled, don't want to stand up, I probably wouldn't even use any of those tips. Any of those, I would just try and get a photo of the animal at its most relaxed state. But if the animal is quite doughy and relaxed, then I'd probably try all of those.
All righty. Does anybody else have any other questions? I think we have answered quite a lot of questions, but if anyone else has got anything else, please send it through. I think we might have answered all the questions, but thank you very much for joining us for a webinar tonight, Alison. I think we've definitely all gone away with a few extra tips and tricks on how to get the best photos of our animals. I'm sure if anyone wanted to book in with Alison for some photos leading up to bull season or anything like that, she'd be more than happy to have a chat and work something out with you. But yeah, so thank you very much, Alison, for joining us.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for having me. I do a lot of, I do bull and female sale photos and videos as well. A bit of online promotion and all that sort of stuff. So if anyone wants to get in touch with me, obviously probably the easiest way is through my Facebook page. But yeah, thank you very much for everybody who's attended and took the time to listen. I hope everybody gained a little bit out of it. It's not easy. Don't take it to heart if you have to do a lot of practicing. I did so.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you for all the little thank you messages. It's very much appreciated. But yeah, I will let you guys all go tonight. We will have the recording out within the next couple of days as well for everyone. But yes, so thank you everyone and good night.
No worries. Good night.
Good night.